Red Army of the Soviet Union, which were the ones that truly defeated the Nazi army, Hitler's projects. We met for a long time, for over an hour at that moment, and we sealed several topics. First, investment in energy, a great relationship in energy. In second place, the opening of trade relations as a market for the Venezuelan exports. In third place, the technological alliance. Specifically, we were talking about the development of artificial intelligence, of a sovereign, autonomous artificial intelligence with Venezuelan characteristics. We have been speaking also in regards to satellite cooperation, which is moving forward correctly with new projects that will have very good news before the year comes to an end. We have been talking in everything that has to do with political training at the University of Policy Training. So we have great plans within the framework of understanding, trust, brotherhood, but a great power, without a doubt, a 1,000-year-old power that has a 5,000-year history, that was a great power, as you know, Ramonet, during centuries, until colonialism and hegemony of the 19th century arrived there. It attacked the European hegemonism, attacked and fragmented the region, and then came militarism from Japan, allied to Nazism, which invaded China, Korea, Vietnam, to all that area that was called Indochina back then. And once they triumphed 150 years of attacks, they founded the People's Republic of China. And from that moment on, the stage of recovery began again of the historic role that China has to fulfill. Always, as they say from rivers, that rivers always find their way to the ocean. And this is their historic path, and China has once again gone back to their path, to their history as the great power they are. And we say with pride and with the spirit that Commander Chavez saw in us, in friendship with China and brotherhood with China, and that's why we have this marvelous relation with them.
Another issue that we were discussing recently was the relationship of Venezuela with another power country, a new deal that may benefit Chevron in the relationship between Venezuela and the United States. It is the great news this afternoon, Mr. President. All news agencies are talking about it. We need some first-hand input from you. Is it true that finally the United States is going to reallow Chevron to continue drilling oil in Venezuela?
Let me first take a sip of water to see if I can answer.
President, a few years ago, 20 years ago, when we had the first interview with Commander Chavez, we had coffee then, but President Maduro is drinking water.
Well, effectively, the company Chevron was informed of the concession of licenses to continue their operations in Venezuela. They reported to the Executive Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez, who ratified Chevron, as we say to all international firms and companies that work in Venezuela, welcome as long as Chevron was doing its work. And while it was in that limbo in the United States, the oil fields that, together with a contract with the Venezuelan government, oversee, they rose in their production. You should know that in this month that they tried all this pressure and blackmail illegal, that a license, who puts the license, who takes it away, Venezuela has grown in 12% of oil production with our own efforts. That's why I always say we don't need licenses to produce. We have learned our own path. Little by little, step by step, we go very far. Very far, as they say in Cali. And well, we have learned with our own efforts, as the great general of Uruguay says, without waiting anything from nobody but from ourselves. We have little by little gone on our way with our own economy, but specifically in the hydrocarbon industry and more specifically in the oil industry. So there are work tables for Chevron to return to their functions, and we congratulate that. I think it's something very positive. Chevron has been in Venezuela for over 100 years, and I want them to have 100 years more, and to continue working without issues. All investors from the United States that want to work with serious people true to the world, on the base of legality, come here to Venezuela. Venezuela is the heaven for investment, for oil, gas, petrochemicals, hydrocarbons, etc. Welcome. Whenever, wherever.
One of our reporters following this issue closely of the relationship between Venezuela and the United States and in the relationship with Latin America, Jorge Gestoso. Good evening, Jorge, from Caracas. He's one of the first reporters.
Of course, congratulations so much to you, the authors of this miracle of communications. Mr. President, 2 questions respecting what means with the relationship with the United States. What can we wait for as the next steps of Washington? And is it possible to maintain a relationship with the United States? Mutual respect.
Listen very well, but I learned how to read lips. Well, Jorge is a legend of Latin American journalism from Uruguay. And he spent a lot of time in CNN, and then he came and be part of the foundation of this Latin American Caribbean project, that is teleSUR. In the United States, we aspire to one day, in the short or long term, to have a relationship of constant communication, of respect and cooperation. Today, we have relations of permanent communications daily on different topics. We are right now, we have respect relations. We are building them up constantly. As you can see, a chain of events of the last weeks, which has a result of this communication and respect, and hope that we can reach a point of cooperation relations across the hemisphere in the framework of the historic. I've explained this to many U.S. citizens that come here in Caracas in private. Almost every day there are people from the States coming here. We meet every day until late in the hour, until late hours of the night. We meet at La Casona, the cultural house in Miraflores. We meet, and I always tell them, this is a conflict that has been going on for over 200 years. The first independence revolution in the continent was in the United States, in the U.S. Revolution, and the second, which was in slavery, was the Haitian one. And revolutionaries of our hemisphere, of what was known as Hispanic America, they got their inspiration from the French Revolution, the U.S. Revolution, and the Haitian Revolution. And then came what was the revolution from South America, which we can perfectly call it the Bolivarian Revolution, Revolution of Bolivar. That's how it was called 200 years ago. But now, from that moment, there were 2 different models. The model that the old 13 colonies of the British Empire, Washington, Jefferson, Adams, Monroe, and the model that Bolivar wanted to promote, and for that was betrayed. But he left it as a legacy. So these are two visions, but that perfectly these two visions in the framework in the world of the 21st century can dialogue among them, and they must respect each other. And each has the right to develop the model that they wish. None of us will never think to interfere in the internal affairs of the United States and tell them what to do. You should not do this, you must do this. Your political system, your electoral system, no one tells them what to do. Tell me what country interferes in the internal affairs of the United States. Not a single one. So that those old customs someday will disappear and must disappear. So we have a vision of independence, of dignity, of respect, and we have an international policy, our Bolivarian diplomacy of peace, which is based on dialogue, on understanding. So I say to Jorge Gestoso, we will always insist, whoever is right now in the White House, we will always insist in holding dialogues, in understanding, and in move forward each as they are, and hopefully in that path we can straighten up many things that have been broken down over the centuries.
As a compliment, I would like you to make a precision in the movement concerning Chevron. Is that a consequence of agreements regarding the 252 migrants returned to Venezuela?
When I was a foreign minister, we met, remember? And I learned a phrase that is said a lot in foreign affairs and in diplomacy. No comment.
So, another question. The situation in Venezuela regarding the economy. It's great news this week when we learned about the growth of the gross internal revenue, gross internal product. On the second has been above 6.5%. There have been many comments lately considering that the economy in Venezuela was on a downward slope, but that is a very specific number that shuts down all those comments.
Well, we are building a model, strengthening them, making a resistance of the model of the 12 engines of production based on productivity, with our own efforts, with our own investments, because we cannot forget that we are a country that is currently blocked, besieged, that has no access to any kind of external financing. Any other country can go and get financing with bonus, with bonds. But for a very long time, since the time of Obama, indirectly all paths were being cut, and then it was openly. The Venezuelan state, for example, has no accounts in any international banks. So how can it make the transactions? We do it, but we have to overcome a certain amount of challenges. The Venezuelan economy has shown a great strength in its growth. We had a disaster in the drop of the GDP of billions of dollars that Venezuela had when Commander Chavez departed and I took office due to all the coercive measures that were imposed. We reached rock bottom with a GDP completely depressed that went to $20 billion. And we have managed with the 13 engines to move forward the growth with our own efforts, with our own capacities, overcoming all the blockades, for example, of the spare parts of the industrial Venezuelan park at all levels, and we have been able to overcome that, recovering all the strength of the internal market, which is the purchasing power of the people and having resources, and that has been recovered. So we have had a stable growth in the year 2022, so it's been 17 trimesters growing the real economy. What has grown the most is the non-oil economy for the first time in over 100 years. And this year, the first trimester we grew 9%, which is a lot. And the second trimester that we received all these threats that we're going to take away this and the other thing, and that the Venezuelan economy, we show that it was fake, that it was false. Even with their blackmails and lies, it disturbed a part of the economic equilibrium, but that has also been restored. And the great news is that the second trimester we had a true growth of over 6%. By the end of last December, Venezuela reached with the growth of last year that was 9%. Again, 140 trillions of dollars in our economy. With the difference that we had an economy of 140,000 billion, we had yearly incomes of 17,000 billions. Now, with the 12% of those incomes, we have the same economy that back in 2012, and that's the importance of what we have done out of our own efforts and the effort of the people of Venezuela. And I aspire by the end of this year, and I aspire to it knowing the facts that this year's economic growth will also go to 9%, which will put us with our GDP above what we had in the past, and it will always put the economy with greater strength and resistance, always developing two main lines: produce to supply the demand and consolidate our local demands, and to produce as well to create new sources of wealth with exports.
President, you were talking about a series of facts that have been happening between Venezuela and the United States, and they have to do with the Venezuelan migrants that were rescued from the prisons, or rather concentration camps in El Salvador, where they were being held. Now, happily, they are back in their home country. So we have a reporter in El Salvador, and he also has a question for you. Mr. Hugo, how are you doing? Welcome for this anniversary. Congratulations to you too.
Thanks a lot, dear Patricia. Of course, greetings to you from El Salvador, recognizing this work. It's a pleasure to greet you from this land, and I use this opportunity to take you these two questions. What is the role that the Salvadoran government played in the release of this 252 migrants that were confined in this concentration camp, the Secot, and also what consequences could be faced by the government of the Salvadoran migrants after these migrants have suffered tortures in this terrorist prison?
Well, greetings to El Salvador, to Roberto Hugo Presa. I always follow his reports as well. And what role did Nayib Bukele play? None. Nayib Bukele does not exist in this negotiation that we made. We talked with the owner of the circus, and we got to an understanding with the owner of the circus, not with the clown Nazi that is currently ruling El Salvador. The condition in which they were received and the conditions in which they were, these 252 Venezuelan young men, innocent, that their only crime was to migrate. For those that believe that migrate is a crime, and it's not a crime, it's a human right. Humanity has migrated since the very beginnings of Homo sapiens. These young men were captured. Some were already living in the United States, and others were captured when they arrived at the border, and they tried to do their paperwork to go legally through the border, through the U.S. authorities. In a given moment, these young men were concentrated in a jail. Some were taken to Guantanamo. The father of the girl Michaelis was in Guantanamo. And what they tell is terrible, the conditions and torture in Guantanamo. We demand the U.S. government that they return them, and they did. They were in a lot and they were going to return to Venezuela, but that day, all of a sudden, they done in El Salvador, which was a great surprise for them and for the whole world. In El Salvador, from the moment they arrived, they were humiliated, mistreated, and violated in all their physical integrity. They were tortured, beaten every day. They threw at them tear gas inside the cells as a pastime, a sadistic pastime of sociopath. They were beaten daily. When the cell was open for them to go to bathe, which is also another human right, they were beaten and many were raped. They were raped. They are all sociopaths. And the person running this, that we know now, is Nayib Bukele. Because tell me a Salvadoran that has come out alive of that prison. That's why I've said that SECOT in its acronym means extermination camp of Nayib Bukele. And I'm not overdoing this. It's the truth. It said that over 400 cases, documented cases of Salvadorans that have died there. A high number of young men have come out of there with some parts missing of their body. But a Salvadoran has never come out in good health to denounce what was happening. But now we have the Venezuelan. Now this is a world scandal. And I hope that there's going to be justice. And the same way we accompany the family members, the mothers, grandmothers, uncles and aunts, brothers, sons of these young men to recover them, and we say that we will recover them, they will return, and they return. That's the same way we are going to accompany them so that there is justice, and that those people that captured them, tortured them, and did what they did to them in that concentration camp pay before justice. You will see it. We never say a word of extra. We always try to be as measured as we can. But in the name of God, I say, me as a Christian, in the name of God, there's going to be justice. And the people that did that to these boys, and the people that do this to thousands of Salvadorans, these tortures, the disappearance and humiliations, they will pay sooner than later. You will see.
We can see, Mr. President, Professor Ramonet said that this is an issue very touching for you, which is outrageous. It's a miracle. But are there any miracles in diplomacy?
Yeah, of course, there are always miracles. Those that believe in God, we know that His power is infinite. But as they say, to God praying, we must always have a helping hand. We have our secrets, our way of acting, and we knew, in first place, with the denunciation, with the truth, with the mobilization and the union of the entire people. Venezuela was united, and we have an international solidarity of social movements, of NGOs, of human rights organizations. We had solidarity also within El Salvador from a group of lawyers that were never allowed to see them, but that denounced before the Supreme Court. We had solidarity from political movements. We had the brave solidarity of Cardinal Gregorio Chavez of the Catholic Church, of the Anglican Church as well. So it was a great mobilization of public opinion, and we knew that with we would obtain justice, and that sooner than later we would achieve that these young men get their freedom. Now they are arriving to their family, and it's very moving. And I hope that teleSUR has access, right, to those testimonies. And it's very moving how the communities are receiving these young men and are supporting them. And all those young men will be reborn here. I told them the other day, you find a Venezuela that resisted, and as the phoenix has risen from its ashes, and you will see a beautiful Venezuela and a people that is, with the passing of the days, more beautiful. And get ready for this homeland so that they have the best from you, and that's what I expect from them.
We were talking with Professor Ramonet that there are 252 moving stories, because all of the stories of these young men are good material for film, for movie. But is there any particular story that moved you for some particular reason that they might have told you?
Well, there are some more intense than others. What they did to this professional hairdresser cannot be described. What they did to this young singer that went with his dreams to sing a happy boy. What they did to the father of my Kellys as well. To all of them, they were stigmatized, persecuted, and then they say that they belong to a criminal group, which was defeated completely in Venezuela, and that we still, whenever we see some remnants of that delinquent gram, we go all over them. So all this campaign that was made by the far right, that all these people made, Maria Corina, Leopoldo Lopez, they are the ones responsible. They are the culprits of having set this narrative of the Tren de Aragua in the United States. They are the ones responsible for the coyotes that took thousands of people to the United States, and they are the responsibles to have asked that these people were taken to El Salvador, and all of them, Maria Corina, Julio Borges, Leopoldo Lopez, Juan Guaidó, applauded when these people arrived to the prisons in El Salvador, and now they are quiet. Now they are keeping a cowardly silence because they are a coward, and I say this before the people of Venezuela, they are cowards, they have no morals, they have nothing, and that's why they have been completely defeated and disappear of the political life of the country, because the people of Venezuela points at them as the ones culprit, not only for asking for sanctions against Venezuela, which is something serious, not only of having called for invasions against Venezuela, but for calling for and celebrating the kidnapping of these 252 young men. The torture that these young men suffer, that thanks to God and the efforts we made, we were able to recover them alive, and now we are supporting them so that they come back to life as the homeland has done.
Let's make a little pause on this special program with President Maduro, given our 20th anniversary, talking about the latest issues in the news. Stay with us. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Profe Ramonet le hace una pregunta y vamos con Oleg desde Moscú y con Yunus, que también usted lo conoció en